This will be short and sweet. Hi everybody. Here are the Conte Crayons I was telling you about this morning. They are sort of a super square, really hard pastel. They're not anything like a soft pastel. They are mostly pigment with a little bit of wax and resin to keep them together, but they are compatible with watercolor, oil paints, acrylics, everything you can think of. Sometimes they do not stick super well. I'm just sitting these next to here. Sometimes the drier that it is, and this painting, we did it a week ago, it's completely dry. Sorry ahead of time for the shadows. And so I have just started by going in and marking, looking at my original photo and the things I liked about it that I didn't make it to this canvas last week. So I went in with white and just marked where I want to change some water or where I think I might want to. And also there's a little piece of greenery that came out to here, and then this gets really thin, and so it has more tension because it's fatter here, and there's places where it gets skinny and has a couple pieces. And I didn't have the trees really drawn in, and so Conte Crayon you can erase with a soft rag and a little bit of water. If you erase very much because of our oil miscibles, you can also pull off some of your original paint. That doesn't always matter. Like, you can just go back in and paint those areas where you want them. But if you want to change something with the Conte Crayon, that's how you could do it. So let's just start. Everything here I did last week. I haven't done shadows correctly, and the first thing I wanted to start with is this line over here is pretty level to the far bank, and then there's a really dark section of the water right here. Now you can see that this is not necessarily leaving a dark blue mark, only in some spots is it leaving a dark blue mark. And I can make it darker but what I'm trying mostly to do is to mark, almost to do another drawing on top of a drawing so that I can just try it out. And then the water above it is significantly lighter, and so I sort of want to just put in roughly some of the kind of tone that I want that upper water to be, and of course with some, with the reflections, which I have not done yet. Then this tree is really significantly bigger in real life, or even for this painting, it needs to be bending over, because part of my point with this painting is that the wind was blowing so hard when I was there. So right here you're seeing that the green is coming out more. That's because this part's really thin and thin and very, very dry, and I put it on as an underpainting, so it's really super dry. So I'm not trying to make this be a painting. I'm trying to test what my idea is, that this tree should be a lot farther down into this painting plane, and that by testing it out with this, I can see if that is what I want to do for this painting. And none of it has any consequence really, because you can just take it off if you want to. Over here, this is where this should be grass that is how I want it to be. So I want to pull this little island of grasses out here the way that it is at Jackson Flats, where there's little pieces of grass and stuff that grow out here into, and that probably just barely comes past that tree, so I'll just make a reference there for myself. And then I want to go really, really dark again right here, so that I can test this being at the end. The darks seem like they are less happy being messed with. This one I also want to have some grass right there. And I'm going to leave some of those whites and stuff. I scraped some things off because I didn't like how they looked, like this section. And so it looks sort of too much like land. And the same thing with here, they just weren't. So it was just getting too heavy there, and so I scraped it off last week and then haven't thought about it since then. And then in terms of grasses, I want to choose different colors. So in order for me to test this theory of letting it go thin, I'm going to try to get this greenery up where it will be on this paint. If one kind of green doesn't work, try another kind of green. But this way, if I have an idea in the middle of something, but I'm afraid I'm going to wreck everything somehow if I paint over it, then this gives me a way to try going forward with either filling it in or drawing something completely new and different someplace else and seeing if that helps or if it hurts. And usually when I'm doing that, I'll get an idea of something else that might work better too, somewhere, just as I'm playing, because that's all it is, it's just playing. So that I know that there's going to be some blue that goes a little farther back in there. This is going to be that green section, and then this is going to have to get a whole lot duller, which I could try that out, and I might as well, because why not? So if I want to dull something down, I'm going to take the opposite color. So this is a burnt sienna. And that, because that's kind of an opposite color to this edge, I can add some of that in so that it lets these trees be further away, because remember that as everything gets away from you, it gets duller, which is by adding the opposite colors that what are there already. So the opposite of green is red. And then, because I want to see if it's going to do that a little bit, I will add some white in with that and then just kind of mush it with my fingers so that I can see if that is the right direction that I sort of like. I'm not trying to do, again, not trying to make a finished painting. I'm just trying to see if that's a direction that helps the painting and helps me know what my next move would be here. So I'm rubbing it in so that there is enough here so that I can see if that's going to give it a sense of going backwards. Sorry for all those shadows. Because something I liked about that composition is that this is closer and that it headed off diagonally that way. I am going to have to do something in this corner because everything is leaning this way. And so I'm going to have to build some layers here, and then I'm going to have to make something that goes around the outside of the tree that definitely reinforces both the wind and that I want your eye to stay in the painting. Because remember, the eye goes from here to here. And if we don't stop it, it's just going to get blown. It's just going to get blown like a kite out of this painting, and it will be done. So you could do this. So I'm doing it with Conte Crayon. If you have got soft pastels, you could probably do it with that. I think they just get really messy, and sometimes they just get into your painting where you don't want them to be. But if you have other kinds, any other kind of, try everything and see what ends up working the best. The only reason that I'm not just painting in these things is because paint sticks to paint, and it's a lot harder later to get rid of it. I want to be sure that my color, just overall, in every painting I do, abstract, landscape, or anything, doesn't get so one-dimensional. Especially though anything that involves the out of doors, because there's so many colors in everything we look at outdoors. If we're not playing with just an abstract idea, we want to be sure that we've got multiple colors in many places, because that makes it look more like it would look in nature. This little piece right here, I kind of like that it's bright, but it sort of doesn't make sense yet. I might bring it back later as a bright spot, but for right now I've got to make sure. If my goal is to make it go that way, back into the, from close to far away, this front tree is actually a whole bunch of little trees. So in between these trunks is going to be various kinds of water that show. There's a branch that goes this way. There's another tree that's back here. And it would not enter the water like that, would it? It would go flat because the water is what's defining the base of this tree. So all of this would be a flat line of some sort right there. So I need to bring down this, it's really a grouping of trees, kind of like a more extensive kind of bush. And then there will be chunks of this water behind that show through, and more branches that go up. I think that's sort of really all. Once again though, as I am trying to get this part to come forward, I'll use something bigger, and I'm not going to do a whole lot with this, but these are bigger grasses. So the closer that they are to the bottom, the taller, bigger they'll be. Then they'll sort of fade into something that is a little bit smaller at this edge. But this gives me a chance to look at that, knowing I'm still bending everything this way. And this is where painting things in a way that is a little more abstracted, as opposed to painting in every piece of grass, definitely looks more real, and including like this weird kind of brick red color. That can easily be what we're seeing underneath, and that is also going to be darker up close and more of it here than there is back here. Back here is just going to be a tone behind whatever's in front. There isn't any way. This is fun because there's just no consequence to it. And then if I don't like something, I can, within reason, again, the biggest issue, this comes right off, but sometimes it comes off with some paint. But let's say I don't like this color, I want to kind of take some of that out. I can just lightly, and sometimes the marks that are left are more tree-like in a way after we get more paint in there. They're more tree-like because they're more random than if we were trying to draw every part of the tree. That looks really, really, really terrible. I would like to apologize to all of you for that who would do a better job. What if I put something darker there? Oh, that would be better. Just for helping me see where that tree, the space it has to take up in here. And down here as well. It's going to be a tree that is here, and it is wider over here too, above that little dead tree, that little skeleton tree there, which I will do a reflection of on the water underneath. I hope that helps. Sometimes there's just something about playing with your painting in a way that doesn't commit you fully, but makes the painting better because you're just playing, and it breaks you out of that locked in, that thing of like, what should I do next? How do I finish this painting? And there's never like one answer to that, but as you play, sometimes things occur to you. The end.